The air in the Burbank studio hung heavy, like the quiet before a storm. Steve Harvey stood at the center of the Family Feud stage, his cue card slipping from his fingers, fluttering to the floor like leaves in autumn. His signature grin, that megawatt smile that had carried him through 4 decades of television, froze for a moment, caught off guard by the man standing at the podium. Marcus, a 38-year-old construction worker with calloused hands and a heart heavier than the steel beams he hauled for a living, gripped the podium's edge, his knuckles pale as bone. Behind him, his wife Sarah and their 2 kids, 9-year-old Emma with her wide, curious eyes and 6-year-old Caleb, his small frame draped in an oversized Spider-Man t-shirt, watched in confusion. The game, the one that promised $20,000, a lifeline for their family, had just stopped. Not paused, not delayed, but stopped dead in its tracks. And it was Marcus who'd pulled the plug. Steve stepped away from his mark, his polished shoes clicking against the stage floor, and faced the camera, his voice trembling just enough to betray the weight of what was coming. "We're not playing for money today," he said, the words cutting through the studio's electric hum. Not this family, not this man. In that moment, Steve wasn't just a host. He was a father, a grandfather, a man staring into the soul of another and seeing something bigger than a game show. This is the story of how one father's refusal to play by the rules rewrote the script for everyone watching. A story of dignity, love, and the kind of courage that doesn't shout but whispers, and still changes everything. Picture it. Just 3 hours earlier, Marcus and his family had rolled into the studio lot in their beat-up Honda Civic, the kind of car that creaks with every turn and smells faintly of motor oil and hope. They'd driven 8 hours from a small Nevada town, sleeping in the car because a hotel was a luxury they couldn't afford. Emma, bouncing with excitement, asked her dad if they'd be famous on TV. Marcus just smiled, ruffling her hair, promising a day they'd carry in their hearts forever. What he didn't say, what he'd kept locked inside until the night before, was why they were really there. 6 months ago, the world had tilted for Marcus and Sarah when doctors sat them down and spoke the word no parent is ever ready to hear: leukemia. Their little Caleb, the boy who loved toy cars and Spider-Man, had a rare form that chewed through their savings faster than they could blink. A second mortgage, 70-hour work weeks, and still the bills piled up like a cruel game of Jenga, threatening to topple everything. The $20,000 from Family Feud wasn't a golden ticket, but it was a chance. A chance for one more round of experimental treatment, a chance to keep Caleb fighting. But as Marcus sat in the green room watching Caleb roll a toy car across the carpet, his bald head tucked under a Spider-Man beanie, something shifted deep inside him. He realized his son didn't need to see his dad chase a check on national TV. He needed to see something bigger, something that would outlast any prize money. When the family took the stage, the studio buzzed with energy. The crowd roared as Steve worked his magic, cracking jokes about Marcus's handshake that could crush a walnut. The Hendersons, a lively, multi-generational crew from Michigan, matched their enthusiasm, ready to battle it out. The game kicked off with a classic Family Feud rhythm. Survey questions, quick answers, Steve's exaggerated reactions pulling laughs from the crowd. "Name something people do when they can't sleep," Steve called out. Marcus's family fired off answers: count sheep, watch TV, racking up points as the audience clapped along. Everything felt familiar, comforting, like the show everyone knew and loved. But then came the fast money round, the high-stakes moment where dreams are made or broken. The Hendersons had dominated, leaving Marcus's family needing a near-perfect score to snatch the $20,000. Sarah went first, her voice steady but her hands trembling as she answered the rapid-fire questions. When Steve tallied her score, 178 points, the crowd erupted. Just 22 points to go and Marcus was up next. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the tension. Marcus at the podium, headphones on, Steve's encouraging nod, the weight of a family's hope hanging in the air. But then, something happened. Something that would etch this moment into television history. As Steve reached to remove Marcus's headphones, Marcus raised a hand, stopping him. He whispered something so soft only Steve could hear. The host's face changed. Not just the smile fading, but something deeper, like he'd been handed a truth too big for the stage. Steve stepped back, looked at Marcus, then turned to the audience. "Hold on," he said, his voice cutting through the studio's hum. "We need to stop." The crowd went silent. Producers scrambled in the control room, headsets buzzing with confusion. Sarah and the kids stood frozen, fear creeping into their eyes. The Hendersons exchanged puzzled glances. Something was wrong, but no one knew what. Steve walked to the center of the stage, no longer following the script, no longer the polished host. He was just Steve, a man standing in a moment bigger than himself. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice raw, stripped of its usual showman's polish. "In 40 years of doing this, I've never stopped a show. I've never broken the rules. But I'm about to because this man right here just said something that matters more than any game." He turned to Marcus. "You want to tell them, or should I?" Marcus stood still, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Then he nodded, leaned into the microphone and spoke, his voice shaking but steady with conviction. "My son has cancer," he said. The words landed like a thunderclap, rippling through the studio. "We came here for the money for his treatment." But sitting there with those headphones on, I realized something. My son's watching, and I don't want him to remember his dad playing a game for money while he's fighting for his life. I want him to remember that some things matter more than winning. Some things matter more than money. The silence that followed was deafening. Audience members clutched tissues, some openly weeping. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "I'm not going to play. I'm asking that the $20,000 go to the Hendersons. They earned it. And I'm going home with my family to find another way. Because my son needs to see that dignity and character matter more than dollars." The studio held its breath, the weight of Marcus's words settling over everyone. Then Steve did something no one expected. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, a sleek, custom Tom Ford he saved for special tapings, and slipped it off. He held it for a moment like it carried the weight of the moment, then handed it to Marcus. "Brother," Steve said, his voice thick, "you just taught everyone here something money can't buy. You taught us what it means to be a father, to have priorities, to have dignity." He paused, steadying himself. "That jacket's yours. But more than that, I'm making you a promise right here on national TV. I'm going to make sure Caleb gets the treatment he needs. I don't care what it costs, how many doctors we call, or where we have to fly him. That boy's getting every chance to beat this." The audience exploded, not the usual game show cheers, but something raw, like a congregation moved by a sermon. People stood, clapped, cried, some raising their hands as if witnessing something holy. Steve turned to the Hendersons, the winners by the rules. "You played fair and square," he said. "You earned that $20,000, but I'm asking you, what do we do here?" William, the Henderson patriarch, a retired teacher with a gentle face, stepped forward. He looked at his family, then at Marcus's, then at Steve. "Give them the money," he said, his voice breaking. "Let us come back another time. This is bigger than a game." Steve stood between the two families, the stage lights casting long shadows. "Here's what we're doing," he declared. "This is bigger than a game. Both families get $20,000. The network didn't approve this, I'm paying it myself. And on top of that, I'm covering Caleb's medical expenses until he beats this. We're getting him the best doctors, the best care, and we're not stopping until he's healthy." The studio erupted again, a standing ovation that stretched nearly 5 minutes. Camera operators wiped tears as they kept filming. Producers abandoned their headsets, staring at monitors in awe. The Hendersons crossed the stage, wrapping Marcus's family in a tearful embrace. But the moment that burned itself into history came when Caleb, small and frail in his Spider-Man beanie, shuffled across the stage and tugged on Steve's sleeve. Steve knelt down and Caleb whispered something in his ear, something private, sacred. Later, Steve would only say, "That boy reminded me why I do this. He reminded me that television isn't about ratings. It's about connection, about seeing each other's humanity." Behind the scenes, Steve kept his word in ways the cameras didn't capture. He paid the $40,000 for both families out of his own pocket. He called specialists at top hospitals, arranged for Caleb to see the best pediatric oncologist in the country, and covered travel costs for consultations. Every 2 weeks, he checked in with Marcus, offering not just money but hope. The jacket Marcus received became a symbol, framed in their living room with a plaque that read, "Some things matter more than money." When the episode aired 3 months later, it became the highest rated in Family Feud history. Viewers, moved by Marcus's stand and Steve's response, donated millions to pediatric cancer research in Caleb's name. Schools taught Marcus's speech and character education. Churches played the clip in sermons. 18 months later, Caleb's leukemia was in remission, thanks to a treatment Steve helped fund and a bone marrow donor inspired by the episode. When the family returned for a follow-up segment, Caleb bounded onto the stage, his new beanie worn for style, not necessity. Steve opened the segment with words that echoed beyond the studio. "I've given away millions, but the greatest prize I ever saw wasn't money. It was a father teaching his son that dignity costs nothing and is worth everything." Marcus, holding Caleb's hand, looked at Steve and said, "Some things matter more than money. That's the inheritance I'm leaving him." And in a world obsessed with dollars, that lesson became a beacon, a reminder to choose what matters most.